LiSTNR production.
Hello, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Jack Schlossberg is a self-described silly goose, John F. Kennedy's only grandson, social media sensation, and Vogue's newly appointed political correspondent ahead of the 2024 US presidential election.
Comes across as a silly goose, says he's a silly goose, but he's also very intelligent. He went to Harvard and Yale. He's got a law background, a business degree, like a very smart guy, but also has a silly side as well.
The nepo baby of one of the world's most famous political families, and his viral internet persona has captivated Gen Z and millennials alike. So, what does he have to say about politics? That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Katrina Blowers. It is Friday, July 19.
Hello, everyone. Well, we're beginning with the news that for the first time since his disastrous debate appearance, Joe Biden is reportedly showing signs he's receptive to stepping down as the Democratic nominee. Now, all this comes after his positive COVID test yesterday. Reports suggest he's now asking more questions about polling numbers and whether Kamala Harris, his vice president, would fare better. The president will be isolating over the coming days at his home in Delaware, but will be carrying out all his regular duties. Sasha, this is a huge change in rhetoric from, even a few days ago when he was saying, the Lord Almighty will be the only one who can oust me from this position. Now he's saying that if his doctor says that he's too sick or that he can't carry on, that he potentially might think about changing his mind on this one. So we've spoken a little bit before about, what could potentially happen because, of course, there are a couple of options here. Now, if Joe Biden does voluntarily step aside, which, it's sounding maybe that could occur now, then Vice President Kamala Harris would automatically take his spot. And that's, I guess, a good thing in many ways for the Democrats because that means she automatically inherits that war chest of donations that they've accumulated for the Harris and Biden campaign. But there are a few other contenders that are apparently polling much better than Kamala Harris. There are 4 Democrats, Senator Mark Kelly, there's the Maryland Governor Wes Moore, the Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and even the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. In all the polling they've done, they're doing a lot better than Kamala Harris. But there is one dark horse that's doing better than all of those people combined, and that is Michelle Obama. Her figures have her even beating Trump. Apparently she said she's not interested, but imagine that. Wouldn't that put a cat amongst the pigeons?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of the Obamas as well, there are reports Barack Obama, former president, Joe Biden was his VP, has also changed his position on whether Biden should continue as the Democratic nominee, basically going from yes to maybe not. They are reports at this stage, though. He has not said anything publicly. We've also heard that 2 of the Democrats' top reps in Congress, so that's Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, have both had personal phone calls with Biden to say you need to stand down. So this did die down. It was only a few days that Biden had this reprieve after the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. Maybe he thought he'd survived that political pressure from his party, but it looks like it's ramping back up now. And look, speaking of Trump, we are being told to expect a different side of him later today when he makes his long-awaited speech at the Republican National Convention. It is the last day of that event. Now, these will be his first formal remarks since he was shot. He told one publication that he's completely rewritten this speech in the wake of the attempt on his life. The focus now will apparently be on unity rather than attacking Biden and his policies. Now, something I want to point out, Katrina, you must have had a crystal ball yesterday because you made 2 predictions that came true in the 24 hours since we last spoke. A bunch of people at the RNC have been wearing white bandages on their ears. The BBC spoke to one. Let's see why they're doing this.
We're helping President Trump set a new fashion statement, and we're standing in solidarity with him for his wound, and we just want him to know how much we love him.
I wish I hadn't been right on that one. I wish that, because that was a crazy prediction, but it doesn't surprise me, but it does sadden me that this has come true.
I know, and yeah, it's such an. One of them looked like, because I was watching this video, the BBC was speaking to all of these Trump supporters with bandages on their ears, and one of them literally looked like a paper towel. They'd just gone and grabbed a paper towel and wrapped it around their ear. You also talked about the women in Trump's life and how we haven't seen Ivanka, his daughter, or Melania, his wife, on the campaign trail or at the RNC at all. But yesterday we heard from Donald Trump's granddaughter, Kai. She's 17 years old, and she talked about, how her grandfather, she knows him as this loving and caring man, that he likes to sneak lollies and soft drinks to the kids when their parents aren't looking. She also hated on the media a bit. She said the media tries to paint him as this different man to what he really is. So, yeah, 2 predictions from 2. Well done.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that they've wheeled out the granddaughter, because they really did need to soften his image among women and make him look a lot more respectable, particularly after the rape and sexual misconduct allegations and the Stormy Daniels situation. He was, polling on the nose with women. So it is a predictable PR move that they've looked around the family and they've found this delightful 17-year-old who performed very well on stage. You've got to hand it to her. That public speaking gig would have been terrifying for anyone, let alone someone who's 17, and made Donald Trump look like a kindly grandfather, not the other sort of person that we've seen in the media in recent times.
MediSecure has revealed the personal data of 12.9 million Australians was stolen by hackers back in May, making it one of the largest cyber breaches in Australian history. The eScript provider announced they were victim to the large-scale breach earlier this year and confirmed that data was taken from its systems as far back as November last year. That's almost 7 months of compromised personal data. MediSecure originally did not disclose the number of Australians that were affected. Now, the company did go into voluntary administration in June after the federal government declined to pay a financial bailout. ERX is now the sole provider of electronic prescriptions to Australians. Now, the information that was stolen included names, phone numbers, dates of birth, addresses, Medicare numbers, but also medical history, the medications that people were on and how often they were taking them and how long they had left on their scripts. So understandably quite concerning for a lot of Australians who might have been caught up in this. Now, as always, the advice for people who might have had their data caught up in these hacks is to, make sure their passwords are all up to date and to keep an eye on their accounts, to be alert but not alarmed. So, yeah, it's still really awful that this just keeps happening, but I think it's just something we have to get used to, unfortunately.
And here's a headline that Sasha really, really rallied hard for because she loves this story so much. And it's one from Queensland. You might remember Peggy the Staffy and Molly the Magpie. Well, they're getting their own cartoon. Now, this series was announced yesterday on the pair's official Instagram page, and it'll bring the adventures of Peggy and Molly to life. This series will also feature a handful of other playful characters, including Sarge the Jack Russell Terrier, Charlie the Cavoodle and Fat Cat Shelley. Now, this couple, Sasha, had insisted that they rescued the magpie from a dog park and that they didn't want to capitalise or commercialise this beautiful relationship that they had on social media with the Staffy and the magpie. But here we have a cartoon and I'm being cynical about it, but you are not.
No, I believe in the goodness of the world, and I said to you off air, I'm cynical about a lot of things, but I'm choosing not to be cynical about this. I would watch this cartoon hands down, no worries. Now, of course, this story, if our listeners aren't aware of it, it all started with a Gold Coast couple, as you said, rescuing this baby Maggie from, quote, certain death. They were on a walk during lockdown in 2020. They brought this bird home and it bonded with their staffy Peggy, and they just started documenting it on social media. They won a bunch of fans on the internet. They went viral a couple of times, and they were separated briefly in March. Environmental authorities stepped in after there were complaints from the public. People were concerned. I understand those concerns as well. As much as we laugh, you want to make sure our native animals are being looked after properly. And the internet reacted to that when the bird was surrendered to environmental authorities. And there was this huge petition and all these people signed it, and they were reunited a few weeks later. One of the conditions of Molly returning to the family was that, they can't make a profit off of the bird, and they had to undergo training for wildlife and also get licenses, which they have done. Look, if you're a fan of the pair, you'll be seeing them on some sort of screen. I mean, whether it gets picked up by TV channels or whatever is another story, but something, I don't know, a little feel-good, hopefully, if you're not cynical like Katrina, to take you into the weekend.
It's still wholesome, and I'm here for that. After the week of news we've had.
Yeah. 100%. Katrina, speaking of a big week, it's time to go off and enjoy your weekend. Hope you have a fabulous time. Next up, we are deep diving into an interesting man, Vogue's newly appointed political correspondent, Jack Schlossberg, and why the internet's obsessed with him.
Jack Schlossberg is a self-described silly goose and undoubtedly a Kennedy. The grandson of JF Kennedy has become a social media fiend, going viral for his random videos like Who Invented Pasta, dancing videos of course, and my favourite, singing a Rihanna song while wearing bluey glasses. But he's about to take on a new role as one of Vogue's political correspondents ahead of the 2024 US presidential election. And you might think, great, just another nepo baby. And yeah, he is. But Jack has both law and business degrees from Harvard, went to Yale for undergrad, has passed the bar in New York, and is the son of diplomat Caroline Kennedy, who's also the US ambassador of Australia. So he knows his stuff. Much like Justin Hill, entertainment guru and host of LiSTNR's The Streaming Service. Justin, thanks for joining us. So why does the internet love Jack?
Jack is he is a new breed of influencer is probably the way I would describe him. But here's the situation. You've got someone who comes from such a pedigree. I mean, you're talking about John F. Kennedy's only grandson. He looks exactly like his uncle, John F. Kennedy Jr. He's over 6 foot, dark hair, same build, and he's very much into politics. But his thing is that he wants to make, this sounds so silly saying this, he wants to make politics fun again for younger people, particularly in the US, because as you know, it's not compulsory to vote. So they've got this situation where it's all doom and gloom. And his thing is that, he comes from a pedigree of politics. He's very into it, very proud of his family, talks about his grandfather with such great praise. But he's also a self-confessed silly goose. Yeah. Which I love. And he says, I'm a silly goose. And so he's on TikTok. He's got 220,000 followers. And he just does silly stuff. For example, 1 minute he'll be talking about his role as Vogue's political correspondent. Mm-hmm. The next minute he's just lip-syncing to Kelly Clarkson.
Yes.
And I'm like, this is the kind of guy I want to follow on social media, because I don't know about you. Sometimes I feel, no, not you, because you're like a professional person. I feel a little bit uneducated when it comes to political things sometimes. And it's not always second nature to actively seek out that information. But when you've got someone like Jack who will tell people about his take on the political climate, particularly in the US, obviously, it makes it easier for just regular people like us to be able to consume it, I think. And that's what he does well.
Yeah, he has said he wants to use his social media presence to exactly what you say, educate younger people about politics. And he was saying, this is a quote, that if you're going to ask people about something serious, you need to make it entertaining or fun. That's what great leaders do.
Exactly.
How do you think he's going to go forward and keep doing this? Will it be the same content we're seeing now?
He said himself, there's a new wave of politicians coming through in the US, which is really exciting because you look at the situation we've got at the moment with Biden and Trump, right? You've got two very old men who behave like very old men. And so he talks a lot about this younger generation of politicians coming through. And yes, they will start at the very bottom and they will, try to work their modern ways of thinking in. And someone else who did this was probably Taylor Swift, where she was like encouraging people to vote and people were like, whoa, you're a pop star. Like, why are you talking about politics? And she was like, I don't care. Like, if we're going to start losing our rights as women, as people, as, citizens of a country, then something needs to be done about it. And he's doing that as well. He's like, he's taking that thing that we know about the Kennedy family, how they were very much about, I guess, how politics was perceived, not just getting up and being all serious and grumpy and, at the moment, taking little snide digs at each other and it becomes about that messy kind of stuff and it's not entertaining to people. People are like, I just want to go on TikTok and watch someone dance. Yeah. And Jack's like, I'm over there too. Yeah. He's like, I'm over there doing the dances. He recently said that he's started doing ballet. And so he's like started showing off his ballet routines on TikTok. Like, and he's doing it in a way that doesn't make him look like he's been a daggy uncle. Like he's 31. He's not, it's not like me doing it. Like he's still cool and he's still young. And people are like, actually, this politics thing you talk about is actually not uncool. So.
Yeah. Speaking of his legacy and the Kennedys, do you think he would still be taken as seriously as a political editor or correspondent if he wasn't the grandson of JFK?
Oh, that's a really interesting question because, he is a nepo baby.
Yeah.
But I don't think he shies away from being a nepo baby, but he almost takes that narrative and you've got this legacy attached to it. It would be like saying, a well-known Australian actor's family, you wouldn't probably call them a nepo baby because they're so beloved. So he knows that I think he's in a very privileged position, but he's also comes across as a silly goose, says he's a silly goose, but he's also very intelligent. He went to Harvard and Yale. He's got a law background, a business degree, like a very smart guy, but also has a silly side as well. So I would probably think that most people in the older generation would probably not take him serious. They would be like, oh, a politician can't be like that. Or someone who speaks on politics can't be silly like that. But what he's doing is he's going, you're not my target audience. My target audience is young people who are not voting. And he knows that there's an element of show business in it. So he's leaning on that interest from people who are desperate to know who he's dating and he will not say who he's dating. But he's like, watch me do these silly videos, but I've also got a little serious message for you as well. So I think if he were without that title, probably not. People would probably say, oh, you're just being silly. But yeah, he doesn't deny that he has that privilege, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm definitely one of those people who want to know who he's dating.
I know. When you look at his TikToks, the search bar that comes up on TikTok is who is his girlfriend. Mm-hmm. It's like the number one thing that's searched about him.
I saw that today.
He wouldn't even tell Vogue.
No, he wouldn't.
No comment.
Speaking of Vogue, should Vogue have political correspondence as a fashion magazine?
So, you look at print, right? Print in Australia barely exists. We do have, although a resurgence of them coming back. Cosmo magazine is making a comeback, super exciting. But, with the global economic crisis, they were one of the first things that disappeared unless they could pivot and become a really good digital brand. In the US, not the case. Magazines are still very alive. They have a great digital presence, but they didn't die down and have to, doggy paddle and look for another way to make money. They just kind of went with it. So that's why we see things like the Vogue 70-something questions, these wild trending pieces of content that are online. I think that it's kind of them jumping on that bandwagon of something that they can see is it meets a lot of criteria for them. It's their target demographic. It's a topic that a lot of people are talking about. They can align themselves with a serious topic, which, Vogue takes itself quite seriously. But you've also got essentially a TikToker with 220,000 followers and they're like, well, that fits the bill as well. He's also handsome. He also takes his shirt off a lot. So he just ticks a lot of boxes for them. And I think they're leveraging off the fact that there's public interest in him. And I think that if he was doing something different, like a different topic, the fact of his pedigree, I think they still would have him involved in something in the magazine for sure.
So you mentioned before, Harvard, Yale, very political background in his family.
Mm-hmm.
Is he qualified to be a political correspondent? And how did he kind of make this decision to jump into this sphere?
So it came about when he was in school, and he just went to a regular school, a private school, but like he was in his class and the teacher was, they were learning about the Kennedy family, and he said he felt really awkward and it would be strange if all of a sudden all your classmates, they know who you are, but then all of a sudden you're sitting in a classroom learning about your grandfather and your mother and, and he's like, oh, I've heard this all my life, but I've not really ever paid any attention to it. So he said he was being really stupid in class and misbehaving, and the teacher called him out and said, do you know what Kennedy's stance on some political agenda in this country was? And he didn't know the answer. And he said he felt really embarrassed in front of his classmates because in an ideal world, he would have turned around and been like, yes, it's this and this and this. Of course I know that. I'm being stupid because I already know this. He didn't know it. So he said he took that moment and he actually went home and he started studying particularly his grandfather's legacy and in particular his speeches and what he said to people. And he makes a point in saying that he has a lot of respect for his grandfather and a lot of praise for him, but also the people that were around him. He's not silly. He knows it takes an army to, there's so many people writing those scripts and putting all of that stuff together. And that was when he was a child. So when he was a child, after that moment, he decided it was an area that he wanted to look into. And then he discovered he actually really enjoyed politics and, being that it was in his blood. So he's kind of been studying it for practically all of his life now after really ignoring it from his early days. And then to have, kind of like the educational backing of Yale and Harvard. And I also think too, he's one of those people that you were surprised that he is so intelligent. Definitely looks like a playboy, could definitely shun that kind of like, oh, I don't want to be a politician. But then all of a sudden, bam, he's like there and he's speaking really eloquently and getting the terms out and understands what he's speaking about. It's not just for airs and graces. So I think the fact that he has that educational background plus the pedigree and the fact that he makes it really clear that this is something that he has made what he studies, I think people have a lot of trust in him.
So could you see Jack in the White House one day?
That's what everyone's saying in the comments. I follow him on TikTok and you take one look at the comments and people are like, you need to run for president. Unfortunately, it will take a long time for that to happen. It's not like you're going to have a 31-year-old in office, but I do feel like that's the trajectory that he's on. I don't think he would say that, but I feel like, maybe his 10 to 15 to 20-year plan is that's where he's probably headed.
That was Justin Hill, entertainment guru and host of LiSTNR's The Streaming Service. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now, but before you go, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone you think might enjoy it too. And if you want to keep up to date on our other content, you can check us out at Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube, just search LiSTNR Newsroom. We'll be back in your feed with another ep this afternoon. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.
LiSTNR.